Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for joining us for our 22nd edition of Digital Dispatches. Delighted today to have Abigail, Andrew and hopefully Nicola joining us from the Encompass team to give us an update on super user, pay it forward, pay it back, and some of the epic training that will be rolled out in the coming weeks and months. As usual, if you can put your questions in chat and we'll pick up on those as and when. I'll hand over to Abby and she will start the presentation.
That's great, thank you. So welcome everybody, and thanks very much for jumping on today around this post-business change side of the house for Encompass. My role within Encompass is a senior program manager within training. So I have the responsibility for ensuring 50,000 plus staff are effectively and efficiently trained on the Encompass system before we go live across our HSC organisations. A big task, but it is doable, and as long as we've got the support, I suppose, across the region with yourselves, we can make this happen. So Abby, just next slide. I suppose for myself, trying to look at this presentation today, and for you guys potentially as end users or managers of end users, I try to keep it in a way that would make me, if I was an end user, what would I want to know on this call today? Certainly able to take questions after that, but I've tried to use that sort of the approach for the purpose of these few slides. So training methodology for Encompass itself, I'm sure you already know this, but Epic are the suppliers of the technical side of Encompass. Encompass is your frontline system, but Epic have a very robust best practice training model that we've taken on board to roll out Encompass. And part of that model is a training, I suppose, methodology that we won't have potentially seen before. And that is, there's more than one step just to be trained. It's not as straightforward come into the classroom. So based on that, we have took on a program of work which will look at a number of different steps before we can successfully say that you are trained. And those are concrete experiences. So there'll be workflow and scenario-based training. There'll be reflective observation, which is end of class proficiency assessments. Playground environments where you can practice. And then we have active experimentation. So you can go in and go live and do a day in the life and shadow charting, things like that, where you can practice again on the system. I do have a slide further up, folks, that'll explain that a wee bit further around those steps within the training. But for now, that's our training methodology, and that's brought on board from Epic. And from other implementations, we've took that on board. So within training itself, who's going to train you guys? How do we know what to train you on? And how do we know what we train you on is actually correct in relation to how the system works? So we have a number of roles within training. For myself, I have a core of staff called principal trainers, senior managers within BSO, and they are responsible for developing out the training material, developing it in a way that it will meet the training environment that we will build out, and then manage the credential trainers who will be the frontline staff. From a principal trainer perspective, they are currently developing out what's called a training environment. So we take a snapshot of the current live system, I suppose the production system, pre-production system. We take a snapshot of that with no data in it, just the actual framework around the actual system itself. And we build out what's called dummy patients and dummy scenarios. So we will create our own departments, environments, patients, their illnesses, their ailments. We will develop those out and we will use that as our mechanism to train people when they come into the classroom, along with materials and lesson plans. So potential trainers are basically working on that now, getting ready, preparing for our go live environment. Within that role, then we have credential trainers. They are the people that will be in the front of the classroom. Your credential trainer will have the end-to-end training. They will go through the materials. They will give you the opportunity within your classroom to be able to go on to that test training environment and be able to start training out and testing out those scenarios that we are explaining as part of the training. Credential trainer will come in for our first go live, which is 9th of November for South Eastern Trust. We will start bringing in credential trainers around about the end of May, and they will go through what's called a 6-week credentialing program. So again, it's not someone coming into post and then being let loose in the classroom. Epic have a credentialing program that lasts for 6 weeks. Those people have to pass that credentialing program before they're seen as effective and efficient trainers in front of the classroom. Folks, can I just ask if anybody's taking calls or anything? Can they go on mute? There's a wee bit of a kickback whenever they go off mute to maybe take calls. Thanks, Linda. So from a credentialed trainer, so now you can see we're two trainers there. We're the principal trainer developing the materials, working with the build team, understanding how the build will look, and making sure the materials meet those needs. Your credentialed trainer will come in and be the classroom person, right in front of the classroom, going through that process. We have what's called specialty trainer. Same role as our credentialed trainer, as in the front room, stand in the front, train the cohort of staff in front of you. But these will be in relation to medical staffing only. So it's an STS program, and that's a specialty trainer. It's a peer-to-peer. And the reason we have that is we want that the trainer is able to answer potentially any clinical questions or any patient safety questions, or explain that workflow from a practical, suppose, frontline role, where if we bring in a credentialed trainer, they'll not have that skill set. And potentially we'll have to go away with a significant amount of questions and come back to answer those questions. So we're rolling out, again, a recommendation from the EPIC program itself. We've took on the specialty training specialist program, and we're currently seeking those cohort of staff that will support that program. And then we have what's called super users. I'm not going to elaborate on that because I know, Abby, you covered that earlier, but super users are critical for us who give that additional support. A super user will be trained before an end user. So if that's any incentive to be a super user, Abby, hopefully that helps. You'll know first. But we will train that cohort first, and then they will basically support and stand in the classroom and be able to support any questions from a clinician perspective or an admin's perspective that potentially the system doesn't answer, but where someone needs to understand that complete workflow. They will also support the go live process. They will be there after go live at the elbow doing their day-to-day job. But if you're stuck as an end user, not too sure what to do, rather than having to raise any tickets or chase flow walkers, you should be able to turn around to the person within that room or in that area and be able to ask that question. And because they've been part of the super user program and have been listening to questions being asked in the classrooms of the end user program, they're able then to feed into that and be able to say, well, actually that came up as a question. I know what the answer is. I understand the workflow. So you're getting that skill set, that what we call super user, that's be able to come in and support your end users. Next slide, please. Thank you. So a very busy looking slide. I understand that we can share the slides, Abby. Is that right? We'll get the slides out to everybody. What I want you to note is on the right-hand side, one size does not fit all. One size does not even fit a department. One size does not fit an area of work. We will be mapping people to training in line with what their job role is currently. And I always use the four elements that I've always been told is recording, prescribing, note-taking, and scheduling. So for a patient, if any of those four things need to happen for that patient, you will use Encompass and your legacy systems will disappear potentially, and you'll use Encompass to do that. One record, one journey for the patient. So on the basis of that, to roll out Encompass training for everybody to go, you have to run a program that the training itself runs for a week, and you'll be hearing information you do not need to hear. We have drilled this down by the principal trainers into that specialism, into those departments, and into the roles that people need to take. So you could look at your emergency department and you could have a mix of staffing groups, and potentially those staffing groups could all have went on different training tracks because their role that they will do in Encompass is different and how they will use the functionality. So it's not one size fits all. Within the actual training itself and how it looks, we'll give you consultant, we'll give you inpatient, nurse, just to show you two different samples. But what I will say is they're very, very close. There's maybe an extra step within the consultant piece rather than the inpatient nurse, but the principles around the training element are the same. As an end user, when you get access through the learning management system to take your Encompass training and you get that registration notification, which we will manage with your managers, you'll be told to take an e-learning. Your e-learning could last 20 minutes, 30 minutes, 40 minutes. And at the end of it, there'll be a number of questions, multiple choice questions you have to answer. You pass your e-learning, it unlocks the world of your classroom-based training. You then will go to your classroom-based training. Your classroom-based training, on an average, we're saying can run between 5 and 8 hours, but that doesn't mean everybody. That's just an average. Some classes may run 2 hours, 3 hours. Some classes could run the full 8 hours. Some classes maybe a day and a half, based on what the training is and the education around it. So in the basis of that, you're now in your classroom. You can't just walk in, didn't do your e-learning, friend down the road's going to the classroom. You're thinking, I'll go with you, sure, it's only an extra seat. I'll take the seat from next door and bring it in. And I'll sit down and hang on the edge of your desk. It doesn't happen like that. There'll be a checklist at the door. And if you haven't passed your e-learning, you're shoot away to go and do your e-learning and then come back again. Our registration obviously will be a lot more tighter than that, but that's just a rough example. You can't just walk into the classroom. So in the basis of that, you will do your learning in the classroom. Your learning in the classroom will be based on what my principal trainers are doing at the moment. They are developing your materials. So you'll have your materials that you're able to click in on the learning management system. If somebody at the front of the room explaining to you each scenario and workflow and how it'll work. And then through each session, they will say, okay, I'm going to stop talking. You now will click into your training environment app and you will go with Joe Blogs on that paper. You've seen the scenario and make that happen. And thanks, Paula. You're the one taught me that, Paula. So thank you for putting that in. And I got it right, which is great. So normally you would say you go to training classes. And many people come out of a training session. I'm hoping that the materials tell you what you need to know because you fell asleep halfway through it. We will break up our sessions to keep you awake and let you practice on that learning environment. A lot of people are smiling. So there's a lot of guilty people here, I think, that do that. But I know it's very difficult. And if you've got an 8-hour session, you can imagine. But that engagement piece from the EPIC model is going to be really worthwhile. We have 2 weeks. We have flew people over from the US, from EPIC, to physically help us build out the training environment. It's going to be like for what your actual environment will be. Maybe not based when you look at it, but it will be, the workflows will be the same. Now, that was good. You've got your practice, you think you're great. Not going to let you out of the classroom unless you pass your test. So there'll be an assessment at the end of it. We will develop that assessment based on questions we already have, but the principal trainers are currently working on that. UPAs is what they're called, and I'm sure that's some kind of terminology in America, but I just call them assessment. They're tests, like your multiple choice when you do e-learning. So there'll be multiple choice questions. You could have between 10 and 20 questions. And the expectation is you will need to pass 80% of that to actually be seen as fit to now proficiently use the Encompass system. When you get through that in the classroom environment, you're still there. There's a 20-minute allocation set aside. Whenever you pass that, you now can actually physically go and get yourself logged onto the system. You'll get your access and you'll get your login details to get into the Encompass system. If in the classroom environment you don't pass the assessment, you can try again, try again. I think it's roughly around 5 or 6 times. And if folks don't pass at that stage, they have to come back and do their training. And we're probably being over generous for 5 or 6 times because my understanding is it's nearly like an open book assessment. So if you can't find the answer, do the e-learning, or do the classroom version of Google. I'm going to look at your materials. I think the answer's there somewhere. But it really is around making sure the proficient piece that you have listened to what you've been taught, you have had an opportunity to practice it. How much of it do you remember right now? There's no expectation you'll walk out and never hear about it again until you go live. There'll be other opportunities, but for now, that assessment is to get you signed off. When you do that, each opens up your LMS, your learning management system, unlocks the next stage. So you can't even say, I slept halfway through it, I'm not bothered with assessment. I just go and say to her, I got it through, can I get my login? It doesn't happen. Evidence on LMS, we will have to pull it out to say you passed, and it goes to a completely different team in Encompass, who then with that evidence say, okay, we'll unlock them. They've now can go in and use the system. So there's a lot of rigorous, I suppose, audit and processes around that to make sure, as much as we can control it, that folk are not just hanging on maybe someone else's shirt tails and being able to say, I'm not going to do all that, but you can show me when we walk out the door. It doesn't happen like that. For Encompass, it will not happen like that. When you leave the classroom, we're going to encourage you, we'll have the ability to go into an application, and we're going to encourage that please, when you can and in your time, practice, practice, practice. You will have still your link into your learning management system. You're still going to have your materials. You'll have the environment to still go into practice with. It's called a playground environment. You will get the opportunity to link into where that is within your trust or how that sits within LMS, still to be agreed. But you'll have that playground environment. And we want to encourage folks, please go in and practice, practice, practice. It may not need for everybody. Some people may go, have a very little input into Encompass. But I learned I'm happy enough. But I've no doubt there's certain staffing groups, and I want to look to nursing and maybe medical teams and our clinicians look across the board, I believe you have a lot more to do than just hit a button in Encompass. So I think practice will really work. And then we go live and we let everybody loose. And if anything comes to light where the training didn't capture it, we have what's called Thrive training. And it is what it is. It's going to help us develop out the training. It's also maybe an opportunity where the training didn't effectively educate. The training didn't effectively show the workflows that group of staff need. Okay, let's go back into the Thrive training environment and let's set up the training where we need to do it and let's get them educated again. So busy slide, showing you in principle, but I want to give assurances today that this isn't a case, and shows you the size of Encompass itself as a system. This isn't just a case of come in, be trained, go out the door, and you're left to your own devices. There's a significant amount of support mechanisms in there to help you with that. Next slide, Abby. So I laboured in this earlier, I suppose, is training success factors across the board. Attending training at appropriate intervals, completing your e-learning prior to attending class. So if you have your e-learning, you will know when you're going to class. You know you have to do your e-learning. You don't need to ask me when should I do my e-learning, because my answer will be before you go to class. If you want to date in a time, it's not going to happen. I'm just going to say to you, I don't know if you're going to walk down the corridor and sit outside half an hour earlier and then go to class. But I would imagine when we schedule and we register folk, we will want to register people that can go to classes that have done their e-learning. So I'm going to say do your e-learning as soon as you can do it, as close as you can to class. From a trust perspective, we will swamp you with comms and we will let you know step by step how this is going to work. And we will give you all the tips and we'll give you all the indications and instructions you need to follow. All we ask from you guys is please do what we ask. Please do your e-learning. Please attend your classes. As much as you can, please pass your assessments. We will spread training over a number of weeks. Normally the process is 12-week training window. So we will do the super users first over a 3 to 4 week period. And the last 8 weeks are spent with the end users, training them as well. And it's a few weeks before we actually go live. So it's not right up to the wire. There's a gap between everyone done and up to go live. We all know that's great in theory, but we know in practice it isn't streamlined as that. And we do have issues with it. We've got the windows and we've got the gaps and capacities. We will use learning management system to report out on a daily basis of attendees, non-attendees, gaps that people haven't trained, gaps within your training schedules where we maybe need to set up other classes. We will have lastminute.com room set up. We will have drop-in rooms. All this will be done in practice to make sure we capture everyone. But we have the tools there and we have the functionality to be able to report and make sure we're managing. We are going to work with your managers. We will work with the managers very closely from here on in to start scheduling, identifying potential where, can't say we can't take you out of your normal schedule, but we're going to work with managers where the big impacts are. How can we work around that and support you with that? Again, we have practice, practice, practice. And it's really encouraging staff to practice those workflows that they learned in the class. Next slide is really maybe useful for folks about what's next. And I have sort of spoke about this before, but just to give you it on a timeline, it will come out to you anyway. To give you an indication, this is for our first go live, which is Southeastern Trust, 9th of November. So we are starting to do work on that, getting into the training piece very, very quickly. We start to look at working with our super users. I think that's end of June towards early July, and then mid-July onwards with our end users. But we also have our registration program kicking off May. And the reason why we're kicking that off early is because we now need to work with managers to make sure that we have identified the right people that need to be trained, to make sure those people are on the right training tracks. And that piece of work has been ongoing from May last year, but this is another chance to make sure working with your managers that we're going to send you on the right training. So it's not a case of us guessing, we think you'll go on. We have already been talking to managers from last May, understanding your roles and your positions in the health service and mapping it to the effective training tracks that you will need to go on. Next slide, thank you. I thought this was useful to put in, rather than putting in the go live timelines, I thought it was useful just to give you an idea around our training timelines as such. Should the go live timeline move, obviously this moves as well. But at the moment, we're looking at Southeastern Trust, super user July 23, end user August 23. Every go live is a 6 month. We have at the end, you'll see that Southern and Western are together, but we have a 6 month gap for each go live. So again, 6 months later for Belfast, we have January 24 for super user, end user February 24, Northern Trust super user July 24, end user August 24, Southern and Western super user January 25 with end user February 25. We have to wrap up the show by the end of 2025. Our go lives will happen. No matter what happens here, everything was squeezed in. Our go live never shifts, completion of 2025. So this is our timelines at the moment, folks, based around what we have as your go live. But just know, when you know your go live date, work it back. 8 weeks for your end users, 4 weeks before that for your super users, a 12-week window to have all the training done. How to get ready. So I thought it was useful to put this slide in. Again, trying to think from your perspective and being on the call today. Managers need to validate that role analysis that we've taken forward at a regional level. Managers have been heavily involved in identifying positions that will need to use Encompass and how that will work in relation to their workflows and training they will get. And we need that to continue. It can't be, we've done it now, we don't look at it again. And that'll be an ongoing process. We will work with your Trust Encompass team. They've been heavily involved from day one. They're now taking a significant role to ensure that it's effective, that what we've done is correct. We're QAing, we're going back out to reviewing, we're getting HR data sets. So we've got new starts coming in, potential leavers, we're looking at movers. So we're putting all those elements together to make sure we're constantly going back out, auditing, policing all the time. We need managers supporting the training registration. Staff will not book themselves on training. We will work that through with managers working on our schedules. However, the position you own in the trust will already have aligned the training track within the learning management system. So that will have mapped in the learning management system. So it's not a case of people go in and pick what they want to pick or the manager picks it. It's already there. The registration piece is about the manager yet again confirming the role that's been aligned, training that's been aligned is correct, and that person works in the room and doesn't feel embarrassed to have to walk back out again. That is not the right training. So so much robust auditing that we have in place that we can pick up on that. Please keep updated. Please read the communications. Please check your emails. I know for some folks, maybe potentially later on, see the word Encompass. Don't need to read that. Move on. Please read your Encompass emails. Every email you get is information. Every email you get keeps you up to speed. The fact you're on these calls today, in my eyes, means you're interested. You want to know about Encompass. Please read your comms and check your emails. All going to be driven most likely through your Trust Encompass team. Right now today, if I asked everybody, do you know who those are? If you don't know who they are, find out. But if you do, great, you're going down the right line. Please find out who your Trust Encompass people are and what they're doing taking forward. Be assured your managers at certain levels, obviously at this stage, are heavily involved. There's readiness groups being set up. There are managers, there's working groups being set up with managers. It's coming through potential different communications. So please keep in touch. I always think have Encompass on your agendas for your team meetings. I think now is the time to put Encompass on. No matter when you go live, what's the update on Encompass today? Is it coming closer to us? Do we know anything further? Has anybody been spoken to around Encompass? Questions like that, please keep in touch and make sure that you're keeping yourself up to speed. But get it on your agendas, folks. If Encompass is impacting you, please get it on your agendas. Ask for updates from your line managers. Have you heard anything yet? I've heard my friend in another trust. They have heard about. Speak to your managers and bring it to their attention. And keep yourself in the loop. Take opportunities to be involved, folks. Your internal working group, if there's opportunities there to be involved, please be involved. It is an easy enough, I suppose. I know we're all very, very busy, absolutely very busy, but it is easy enough to sit back and let this happen and then be involved whenever it goes live. But I think try and be proactive. Please try and be involved where you can. But obviously, I appreciate, yes, your day-to-day job. And look for Encompass vacancies. Took the opportunity, folks. HR background, took the opportunity to promote vacancies. But your credential trainers, folks, hopefully coming out next week. Fingers crossed. I'm only about 3 months behind. But your credential trainers coming out. There will be a band 5, folk. They will target, I suppose, around that background with a wee bit of training or presentation skills. But there'll be an opportunity to come and be involved in Encompass. But not necessarily, forget about vacancies as such. Please be involved at your trust level. There's a few trust leads on here. There's a few business change managers on. You're going to be promoting posts, obviously, across your own trust around Encompass. So folks, watch out for those. And if you're interested, we really, really encourage to please get involved. It's a massive, massive change within the health service. It is not a digital transformation program. It's a complete transformation right across the service. And it will impact, even if you're not being trained in Encompass and won't use Encompass, I have no doubt somewhere along the line you'll have an involvement some way in the background that Encompass will cross your door, because that's the size of it. And then I think that's me. I did say I'd ask slide questions, but maybe there are none. And hopefully folk are picking up in the chat. Folks will maybe get a copy of questions in the chat. If I can put a bit more substance behind it, I'm happy to do that. Abby, I'm going to hand over to you now.
Thank you. That was great. I haven't been able to look at the screen, so I just wondered if Linda had seen. Oh, it looks like there is quite a lot of questions in here. So,
sorry, Linda, you're on mute.
There's been a flurry of questions. You'll be delighted to know.
Just about training, about nothing else.
A couple of themes running through, so we'll try and cover as many of them as possible.
Great.
So what about students, Nicola? What's happening with them? And while they're on placement, will they have access to the system?
So at the moment, I am working with a number of groups to look at the not substantive staff. So your agency, your bank, your student, your medical rotation folk that naturally don't wave out to say we need Encompass. The answer is yes. If they need to use Encompass to do their job, they will be trained. But identifying those cohorts at the moment, I'm working with your trusts Encompass teams and with regional teams as well across your professional leads to look to see what is the process to identify or to bring these people in to your trusts. And at that stage, where's the touch points that Encompass gets involved to make sure that they're effectively trained. There is a robust training program, folks. I mentioned it earlier. It runs between 5 hours and 8 hours on average, but not necessarily like that. But it's also what's called a just-in-time training, and that will capture potentially cohorts that maybe come in very, very quickly, and need the, I suppose, the high-level training on Encompass to be able to go in day one, do their job. But your students and the like of your rotational medical trainees, we do know this is every year. It's mapped out from a regional perspective, so we do know that that's managed well before the person walks through the door. So I'm starting to engage with those groups to start saying, okay, if they need Encompass, I need to build them into the training program. Now, we will identify those, obviously, then that are part of the go live, that are physically here at the moment. They'll be part of that cohort. But I'm thinking about future proofing where potentially you are live and how do you bring the next round in. So we're working on that now, Linda, and getting all that thrashed out. But they haven't been forgot about. That's the main thing.
Okay, and how quickly will we be getting notifications out with people talking on chat about organising clinics and reorganising them, the practicalities of keeping business running while trying to get masses of people trained is obviously a concern.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. And you know what? This isn't something that has been asked 101 times, Linda. And it shows, you know, the interest there around they want to be involved, but how can I get trained? So again, this is being taken on through the program. We're talking to the right people at the moment in-house within the program to start looking at that. I am working with the EPIC, my equivalent in EPIC, when we've started to identify, by doing the role analysis, Linda, we're able to identify who needs trained. We then map that in what's called a training calculator, and it just puts it all into classes. And then from those classes, we're going to build them into schedules. And then we're going to share that with our trust leads and work through those schedules. I can tell you now, folks, we cannot guarantee that your role will not be interrupted day to day. There will be an interruption, but if there's huge impacts where it impacts on the service, we will work with your trusts, with your professional leads, and with your managers in the trust to see what we can do to change those schedules or review the schedules. So it's not a case that you're just going to be told. We will look at that and we will make sure we queue that with the trusts from a regional perspective. From a practical perspective, it's all driven by dropping the information in and allotting it to time slots.
And what about somebody who's maybe off long-term sick or is off on maternity leave while the training's happening? What happens when they're coming back to work? Is there refresher training or special classes for them?
No, they will come into the training program as normal. So we'll need to make sure we're picking them up in training classes. So if you have a cohort coming in, said you're just about to go live and your training sessions are over, when we stop the training sessions in full, we continue to keep the credential trainers and those STS trainers, and we continue to keep classrooms and space. So where there's a cohort potentially coming in and they need trained, we have the trainer come into the classroom and to train them. So Linda, where we pick up potentially people coming back, it's about where managers notify Encompass to let us know those processes we're looking at now, Linda, along with those new starts, movers, students, junior doctors, agency and bank. all looking at all that now, because that's about processes more than about we understand who they are. We need to understand the process because we don't have a crystal ball. So we need to understand and get that process robust, that encompass is in there. You need to train them on encompass if they haven't got it.
Abby, one for you. Is there a list of systems being replaced or areas that are in scope?
Sorry, I need to get off mute. So I will find out if we can share the list. I know that there has been a list and there's been edits to it. I don't know if there's someone on the call that's better to answer this than me, but whether we can share the list or not of exactly what systems are being replaced.
Yes, sorry, I'll step
cool.
in there. Linda, yes, there is indeed. And if anybody wants to send me an email, I'll send you a list of what has been in scope and what is not in scope.
I know from my old background, Linda, business change as such. I know there were conversations around that and that scoping piece around those systems. So it is sitting with business change, Abby. So what Joe and Paula said, yeah, he has that list. So if he's going to get with hands, just double check that it can go out. That'd be good. We know that it's worked on. Yeah.
I think we've addressed the query of is this going to be mandatory training? I think the strap line, no access, no joke.
Yes, no training, no access, no joke.
And I think there is an Encompass dedicated website that you should all be able to go on and see who your points of contact are. So get on there. Paul has put it up in the chat. So you should be going on there quite regularly just to keep abreast. Because yes, we'll have these sessions once every 3 months and more frequently if need be. But definitely do keep an eye on the website for updates there and the newsletters that go out through your own trust comms teams as well, because that will give you the most up-to-date information as it's made available from the centre. Is there anybody else, any other questions that they want to ask?
Can I just mention something? There seems to be a lot of questions there about general awareness for Encompass. I'm one of the AHP information officers in Southern Trust, and I can speak, I think, I can see some of my colleagues there. We're more than happy to come along to team meetings to present an overview of Encompass and to provide sort of, general questions and answers around what's happening within Encompass. So if you want a representative to come and present at a team meeting, contact your trust PMO and they will get in touch with the relevant people for you.
Thanks, Angela. That's a great help, because I did see there's a few questions around what's happening in my specialty area, etc., etc. So that would be good if we can get some one-to-one sessions with people who have very specific questions for their areas.
Yep, speak to your managers and get them to get in touch with PMO. That's your trust PMO, not central PMO.
I've just seen in the chat there's a question about how do you apply to be a super user. So once it's coming around to your time to be a super user, just speak to your manager. They will know how to put you forward for being a super user. If you want to be a pay it forward, pay it back super user for SET, again, please speak to your line manager to check that that's all okay with them, and you can apply through them by putting through an expression of interest.
Can I just ask something there about the training and the dates when they will be available for staff? I'm conscious about the wards having enough time to be able to book staff onto the training. So I'm just wondering how far in advance will we have those dates?
So I suppose if you look at it now and that timeline for South Eastern Trust, we're starting in May to work with the registration piece for staff starting their training in July. So it'll be the same for all trusts. We will work within that potentially, maybe a month and a half before we physically start doing the training. So each trust we will go as part of our training program with them and our plan and our timeline. But there'll be plenty of notification. At the moment, I'm starting to work on the schedule for South Eastern Trust. So Kate, I'm not too sure what trust you're from.
Sorry, I'm from the South Eastern Trust.
Okay.
That's why I'm in, and the ward managers are making off duty out for April at the minute. So that's why I'm
Grant. So I'm working on the schedule now for Southeastern Trust. We'll start to take that over March into your Encompass team within the trust and start to work with the manager to see does this work or not. And then from that, we'll start to do the registration piece most likely. I would say probably early May, we'll start to try and put in the registration schedules at that stage, Kate.
Okay, all right, thank you.
All right. Good question.
There was one very direct question about how Encompass was impacting your clerk roles. Should that person be contacting their admin Encompass lead? Who should they be speaking to?
I would suggest they check it into the trust, into their trust Encompass PMO team as a starting point. And then from there, we'll direct them to the right person to get that information around. There are a number of working groups and decision groups in it at the moment, and I wouldn't want to speak on behalf of those. So, but I would say your direction, if the trust folk are happy enough, take the question that line directly, or the line manager, yes, absolutely, Una, or your line manager as well.
And also a list of all the systems that are being replaced. Is that part of the scoping document?
Yeah, I think that was the question earlier, Linda. Paul was able to say, yeah, same thing.
Just on the systems being looked at for replacement, as I said, the emails in the chat there. If anybody wants to, as I said, to get a list of, if I get your details, we'll get that list cleared officially to be issued, and then we'll get it out to everybody. So please drop me an email so don't forget you. And
I'm just
on
calling Claire.
just on a separate note, yes, role impacts, impacts on jobs and roles. There is a significant piece of work going on that. HR teams are currently, from all the trusts, are currently engaged in that work. Leadership and senior leaders will be appraised, managers will be appraised over the next while as that process rolls out. As you can imagine, everybody will be impacted by Encompass. Some will be impacted much more than others in terms of their roles. So we just need to make sure we're telling the right people the right information. So that work's ongoing.
Okay, I want to play devil's advocate, not like me on any of these sessions. Pay it forward, pay it back is a really good concept. Have we really scoped out how this is going to work in practice? I'm very conscious Southeastern Trust will be first to go into the fires and they'll need all the help that they can get. Belfast hot in the heels 6 months later. And we're anticipating that Southeastern Trust will be still implementing, still building on their working knowledge, and yet we'll be expecting them to be the good neighbours and come across and help colleagues in Belfast Trust. How practical is that?
Yeah, good point, Linda. But we are, with Southeastern Trust, we've been really fortunate that we have got the majority of our super users. Like, we have had so many people come forward, and it's brilliant that we don't actually need really that many from each trust. We're doing the gap analysis at the moment and working with our super user coordinators from each trust to make sure that we are picking up, you know, the specific roles that we're missing from the Southeastern Trust super users. So it's not that many, it's not as significant as it seems. Like, it seems like it's probably a lot more. There are more from Belfast with bigger trusts and things like that. But in principle, how we're working through it, we're still figuring out some logistics and figuring out how it will work, but 100% we will want Southeastern Trust to support Belfast, even though it's just after their implementation, the same way, so literally paying it back to them. But they will have super users already, so they will already be trained. So that's one thing we don't need them to do for Belfast from Southeastern Trust. They'll already have that training.
Okay. Any more for any more? Okay, as anticipated, I thought this was going to be a well-attended session. So at one point we had over 215 people online. The video will be available as soon as we get it scripted, and we'll put that out. I know a Friday lunchtime isn't always convenient for everybody, but please share it with colleagues, point your teammates to it, you know, at team meetings and stuff. And we'll get any collateral back to you as quickly as we can. Next month, we have a session on our apps library. So hopefully we'll see some of you on that as well. Again, thanks very much for taking the time out of a busy Friday, and I hope to see some of you again next month.